So, Rusty, would you tell us about your books?
Yes, I'd be very pleased to. To date, I have published 10 titles, and 6 of those titles are still available. I started to publish my books back in 2009, and my very first publication was a collection of traditional and contemporary poetry that was called Feelings, A Rhythmic Journey in Thought. And the next year I followed that up with a collection of short stories for children entitled Young Minds. After that, I published my very first Passion in Paris, which was come out in 2 parts, Passions in Paris, Connections to the Past, and Passion in Paris, Directions to the Heart. And following that, I did a new poetry collection that I entitled Impressions, which was a collection of the original poetry that I had put out in Feelings, along with some additional content and new poetry that I had written. And following that, I did a new children's collection of short stories that was based on the original Young Minds, along with new content, and I called that one Through the Eyes of Innocence. And then I decided to write some comedy for adults, and I did my very first one of those. It was called The Misadventures of Derwood Tugbottom, and I followed that up with a brand new revision of the original Passion in Paris, and I put it out in just one book, and it was entitled Passions in Paris, Revelations of a Lost Diary. And following that, I did another romantic fiction and named it Willow's Walk. And then I have since then done a second follow-up to the first Derwood Tugbottom and called it Derwood Returns. And to date, that is where I'm at.
So, do you find writing entertaining?
Yes, very much. I love to write. I have always loved to write, and I find it much easier for me to express my thoughts and feelings in a written form than verbally. And I love to express the way I feel about things, and I hope that people that are reading my work are entertained as much as I am when I write it.
So, is there any type of central message or maybe an underlying theme that you could say runs through any of your books?
Well, I don't know if when I write my books, any of my stories, if I'm writing it with that particular idea in mind, but I think if I would have to comment on that, I would probably say that there could be a central message found in Passions in Paris, Revelations of a Lost Diary, and that would be to never give up. And what I mean by that is regardless of what the situation is that you find yourself in life, whether it is a difficult time or whether it's a happy time, is to not give up on the way that you perceive what you're feeling. If you're having a hard time in life, just like dig your heels in and don't give up. Just keep trying and don't let anybody tell you that you can't do something when you know perfectly well in your heart that you can. And I would also have to say probably in Willow's Walk, the main message there, because it takes place, the main part of the story takes place with someone Willow meets in a computer chat room. And of course, she doesn't realize that this person that she's met is just feeding her a line as time goes by, and it ends up in a very, very bad situation for Willow. And so I think the message there for anyone is to beware of what is on the other side of a computer screen, because you don't know who it is. They can be anybody that they say and be anything that they say and be nothing like what they say or who they are. And if by chance you end up actually meeting this person, it may end up in a very, very bad situation. So just to be very, very careful when you go into something like that.
Now, do you draw from your own life when you're creating any of these storylines?
Sometimes I do. It just depends on the story that I'm talking about, like that I'm writing or what I'm talking about. I've had a lot of life experiences so far in my life, and I think it does tend to create a lot of chance and areas to pull from. So I would say yes to that.
So, what's the most difficult challenge you face in regards to writing?
I think coming up with new ideas all the time, trying not to be repetitious in what you write. So one story is not like when you put a book out, it's not the exact same of what you just put out. It's a completely different story. It's coming from a completely different place altogether. And that also, I would say, getting the work noticed, having good marketing, and being able to project your work to as many people as you possibly can. It isn't always easy, but it's something that you have to relegate yourself to and decide when you begin something like this that this is the way you want to go, this is what you want to do, and you know it's going to be a challenge each time. And sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not quite so easy.
So, looking back at the work you've created, is there anything you would change about any of it if you could?
Oh yes, I think any author, if they were being honest, would say yes to this as well. I think with me, probably the layout of the first four titles that I did. I was very green at that time when I first put them out, and I was sort of like feeling my way as I went. And looking back, I mean, there were a lot of mistakes that I made because, the fact of being, not having that much experience at that time. This is back in the late 2000s when I was looking like at 2009 when I first put out my first title. And because of not knowing the field and having experience in it, the layouts could have been better. The overall stories probably could have been better. The editing definitely could have been better. And so if I could go back and change any of that, those would be the areas that I would definitely change.